a real good term that I describe my art is a collision. It is a collision of like fine art, craft, and what I would refer to as the fringes of society, kind of what we're talking about: punk rock, skateboarding, metal, the cutty, and it's all kind of collected together, and then it's collided into the form of a functional piece of artwork.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes: musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms, life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Creative Asylum. Today's episode is with Ben Venom, heavy metal quilter. Say what? Yeah, that's right. He's an artist whose medium is quilting, textile arts, but his themes and a lot of the time his materials are punk rock, heavy metal, popular skate culture, that sort of thing. Hard to describe, you just have to see it. If you're listening on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever, this is one of those episodes that I suggest you might actually want to go over to YouTube and watch, because you have to see his work to believe it. And once you see his work, you're probably going to be kind of mind blown. So let's just get over to the conversation right now with me and Ben Venom. Thanks for being here. Hello, sir. Ben Venom. It is good to see you here in the Creative Asylum. How are you doing today?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well.
Yeah, I'm super psyched you're here. I think I first discovered your work probably a couple of years ago, thanks to Sluggo, and my jaw just kind of dropped when I saw the work you do. I'm hoping most people listening to this will heed my warning and stop listening and go to YouTube and watch, because whenever we have an artist on the Creative Asylum, we always try to integrate, a lot of visuals of your work. And I'm willing to guess that you're probably the only heavy metal quilter we'll ever have, unless you prefer to be thought of as a punk rock quilter, or I don't know. I just know what the what the World Wide Web says.
Yeah, I refer to myself as an artist that's currently working in the form of textiles.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
to keep it really general.
Sure. But you seem to have kind of a specific kind of perspective that is informed in a lot of ways through kind of certain subcultures, specifically kind of musical subcultures, right?
Yeah, 100%. A big inspiration for the work that I do is, punk rock, heavy
Hmm.
metal, skateboarding,
Right.
etc. It's stuff I grew up listening to when I was an early teen, and stuff I still listen to today as someone
Right.
who's in their late 40s. So yeah,
You're still a young man.
I know that's what Sluggo would say.
Yeah. Well, me and Slug are we're in our in our walker phase of life.
Granny
Him maybe
phase.
him. Yeah, here our granny phase. Exactly. Well, he's always been in his granny phase. So, how old were you when you started like down this path of working with textiles and specifically working in quilting?
So I've always been interested in art from a very early age, but more to your question, the first quilt I made was in 2008,
Okay.
and I had just graduated from the San Francisco Art Institute with my master's degree, so I have a Master of Fine Arts.
Hmm.
And back in 2006, I had seen an exhibition called The Quilts of Gee's Bend at the DeYoung Museum here in San Francisco.
Okay.
And just to backtrack a little bit, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. So all my family is still back in the deep South. These quilts, the Gee's Bend quilters are from a very rural part of Alabama. So
Okay.
this show had been traveling around the country for many years, and it was at the DeYoung Museum in 2006. I saw that exhibition, was completely blown away by it. Fast forward a couple years, I graduated with my master's, and then I was invited to be in an exhibition in Berlin, Germany in 2008. and I wanted to do something really big for that exhibition, and so I decided to make a quilt, and so I had all these punk rock and metal T-shirts lying around from going to see bands since I was an early teen, and so I decided to cut them up and turn them into a quilt, and that was in 2008, and from pretty much from then on, I primarily been working within the textile medium. So now we're kind of pushing upwards to almost 20 years, 18 years.
What specifically were you studying? I mean, you said you got a master's.
At the San Francisco Art Institute, with the master's program, everyone would come out of there with the master's degree. You didn't really have to go into like a specialty.
Right.
Which was great. So I was able to take like some film classes. I took a lot of printmaking classes, but primarily I came out of like the printmaking department. I did a lot of like screen printing, which was kind of what I did in my undergrad degree with my Bachelor of Fine Arts. I did a lot of painting and printmaking. So I continued that on into my master's degree. But even while I was in like the second year of my master's degree, I just started doing a little sewing. And then that kind of led into the quilt making after I graduated.
And do you ever do any like original art on fabric that you then incorporate into any of your quilts, or do you mostly use like found fabric or found pieces or things that people give you?
I have a little bit, but one of the big concepts behind my work is this idea of upcycle and reuse. So
Right,
I
right.
tend to use a lot of recycled fabrics and or donated from friends or family or the general public, because one way to look at my work is it's just not mine, it's all of ours. So everyone's unexplained stain, tear, or rip is now on view in the form of a functional piece of artwork, typically a quilt.
Okay. So you sort of have integrated into your work aspects of community and, as I'm thinking about it, aspects of personal human experience as
Hmm.
well, which is really cool. And I know you also do some clothing as well, like jackets and vests and that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Um, so as an artist, you may hate this question. I don't know if
That's
you
okay.
I don't know if you've seen the episode that we did with Lori Lipton. She talked about the fact that like everybody always asks her, how long did that take? And
Hmm.
she's like, I don't know. It took as long as it took, because
Hmm.
she doesn't measure her creative process in terms of time,
Right.
because she works with this incredibly, detailed pencil and graphite and charcoal work and drawing, some of which are like literally 30 feet across. And she spends literally like, up to 12 hours a day doing nothing but just drawing.
Hmm.
So so I'm just wondering, I'm assuming with quilting maybe that the way that time gets spent is kind of a little more uniform.
I mean, it can be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a totally fair question because people
Hmm.
are interested. They want to know more about the process, right?
Right.
And part of that is how long it takes to make something. My bigger quilts, I tend to like to work quite large. They can take anywhere between 2 to 5 months to complete,
Okay.
and that's like working as many hours in the day that I can. I'm married and have a 7-year-old daughter, so
Hmm.
since we became parents, I can't be putting in 12 hours a day in the studio anymore.
Right.
So my time is kind of broken apart a little bit more now, but it does take a while. And the process I would account for the idea, doing the design, cutting the fabric, and then actually constructing the quilt is
Right.
included in that time frame.
Sure.
So yeah, like 2 to 5 months.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. I mean, in my mind, that seems like a lot.
Yeah,
But
it is.
what is the largest piece you've done?
The largest piece I've done is a curtain that I made about 3 years ago. It is, 30 feet wide by 15 feet tall, and it is 2 parts, so it, like, opens in the middle. It's on a ripple fold track, so it's like a track system at the top,
Uh-huh.
and it's hanging at the Little Saint, which is a vegan restaurant/event space up in Healdsburg, California,
Okay.
so, Northern California,
Wine
and
country.
Yeah, it's right in the middle of wine country. They set up a little stage in front of it so they have bands play. I think their capacity, it's like a very, like, intimate venue upstairs.
Hmm.
The restaurant's downstairs, the event space is upstairs, and I think their capacity is, like, maybe 250. Like, Beck played there recently, but he just did all acoustic. It was like an acoustic set, and then St. Vincent is playing there,
Oh,
a
nice.
couple of other people, but that's the largest piece I made. That took probably like 2 to 3 months. But that one I pieced together, and it was kind of interesting because that was made kind of like basically still during the waning days of COVID.
Hmm.
And at that point, I still had my art studio in the back of our apartment,
Right.
and which is pretty small. Our apartment's not very large.
Yeah, you're in San
Um,
Francisco, right?
we live in San Francisco.
So I'm familiar with those apartments
Yeah, it's not
for
some like
sure.
vast expanse of a space, but luckily we live like in a 4 unit building, and one of the units downstairs and over was vacant at the time,
Nice.
and I allegedly broke into that apartment and was able to use the floor space in that apartment to piece the curtain together. Then I would
Okay.
sneak up the back stairs to sew it where my sewing machine was, and I'd like sneak back downstairs to like piece it back together. So it was like a lot of like going up and down the back staircase of the building, unbeknownst to my landlord.
Against this is all alleged.
Right. I can neither confirm nor deny such
Precisely.
activity.
Precisely. So, but now you have a studio?
Yeah, so for about 10 to 12 years, I had my art studio in the back of our apartment.
Yeah.
And then about 2.5 years ago, I moved it to where I am right now. And I have a full-time job, whereas I work at an artist in residence program.
Uh-huh.
So it's basically this big warehouse here in San Francisco. It's called the Space Program SF. And it's a warehouse located in the Dog Patch neighborhood, and we have a lot of equipment here. Then I have a little studio space upstairs where I have my sewing machine and a couple of tables. That's where I'm at right now today.
So is that like an artisan collective or something?
It's not a collective, it's just basically like a residence program. So we invite
Okay.
artists to come and make work here. It's an application process, and they get to use the facilities for 6 weeks. They get like a stipend. They have 24-hour access. And then me and the founder and director are on site Monday through Friday, basically office hours, to assist the current resident to fabricate work.
And do you get to do any of your own creative work during that time, or is that more
Yeah,
like
absolutely. That's kind of part
that's
of
great.
part of the deal. So, which is kind of, I don't really have a job title here, but I just kind of call myself the studio manager because I help run the facilities.
Right.
And as part of that, I have a studio space because I'm here. So, which is you need to be here to kind of run the space and check in on things and make sure the current resident is doing well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's typically my job. And it's a very nice space. So I'm sitting in a recording studio right now.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. That's why you
Um,
sound so good.
yeah, I'm in a very, very nice recording studio.
So, in terms of the artists that come to that program, that can be sort of any sort
Mhm.
of practice, any kind of I can't think of the right word right now, but just all types of creatives can might have different things that they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're pretty versatile here. Like I said, we have a recording studio so we can record bands. We have like woodworking, we have welders, we have sewing machines, we have a lot of screen printing capabilities. I do all the screen printing. I do obviously all the sewing machines. The founder and director, Judd Bergeron, deals with a lot of the sculptural aspect of the program.
Hmm.
He's very knowledgeable about bronze casting. And then if a musician wants to come in and record, we'll hire a sound engineer.
That sounds like a really cool space. I'd love to see it next time I'm in San Francisco. If that's
Yeah, you're welcome to come by anytime.
yeah,
I'd love
that's
to have
cool.
you.
So, in terms of your work, like how much of your work is commissioned versus like how much of it is just I'm going to work on pieces for a show or, whatever.
Well, the last couple of years, it's been a lot more commission based, and that's just because I kind of purposely moved towards that. I got a
Uh-huh.
little burned out with just like pumping out work. I kind of turned into like a mini factory, and all I was doing was just making work for galleries and museum shows, and I just wanted to slow that down a little bit
Sure.
and kind of do some commissions that had been kind of backlogged, try to move through that. I'm about finishing up on that, and now I'll start doing more kind of exhibition and work probably later in the year. But it ebbs and flows because sometimes I have commissions, sometimes I don't have commissions. But I'm very particular about what I take. So I don't take any old commission. I'm very particular about what I take, and I'm also particular about what type of exhibitions I do at this point. Because as you know, we're not getting younger. Time is everything. I want to utilize my time to do what I really want to do, but also what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I also I think the commissions make sense because somebody's actually paying you to do something, whereas exhibitions, you never have a guarantee, right? I mean,
Correct. Correct.
and typically they take a really huge chunk. Not necessarily being critical, because it's, running galleries is not an easy thing.
Mhm.
I always admire people that run a gallery. I'm like, okay, best of luck. I hope,
Yeah, that's
I
what I say. I
hope it
say
goes
good
well
luck.
for you. There was a cool gallery here in San Diego that they recently shuttered their doors, and I think it was just probably economics. But and the fact is, like, this woman had really remarkable taste, and
Mhm.
I'm very picky myself in terms of what I like and what I don't like. And so when I see a gallery that is consistently showing work that speaks to me, I'm always really impressed with that process.
It's a hard thing.
Yeah, it is. And being an artist is a hard thing. And I feel like it shouldn't, but we live in America, where it's probably one of the hardest countries to be a successful artist. So it sounds like you finally reached a point where you are, for the most part, being able to support yourself through through your art.
Well, I do have this job, so that helps. So I think it's all about like side hustles, you know? Almost everyone I know that's like a visual artist and or musician has a couple side hustles. I know a couple of people that just do their art solely,
Yeah.
but I think that's kind of rare, even more so these days. And especially to be able to do that for a long period of time. But yeah, like again, it kind of ebbs and flows. Like I take more commissions, I'll do less, day work, etc.
What is the nature typically of the kinds of exhibitions you do? Is it like small galleries, large galleries? Do have you had museum showings?
Yeah, I typically do museums, museum exhibitions, or contemporary art galleries all around the world. My next show will be at the Santa Barbara Museum, and I think it opens February 22nd, but then the reception is in March.
Okay,
And it's just a group exhibition with some other, so a couple of pretty well known artists, and I'll have like one piece. It's a group show. I'll have one medium sized quilt in that exhibition.
okay. Is the show mostly textiles, or is it all kinds of
This particular
mediums?
exhibition is primarily textile based, but then, like, recently, I had a solo show at the Mesa Art Museum in Mesa, Arizona.
Uh-huh.
I had a solo exhibition at the Hickory Art Museum in Hickory, North Carolina. So stuff bounces around.
Uh-huh. How does that work? I've never known. Like with museums, I know how it works with a gallery.
Mhm.
Here's the art. This is the price. People buy art, and then, commission takes their cut, and you get the other piece of that,
Right.
theoretically. When you're at a museum, museums aren't necessarily selling art.
Correct. There's all different types of levels of museums, right? There's
Okay.
like the New York Met, and there's the New York MoMA, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's
right.
LACMA. Those are all up pretty high, right?
Those are the major labels. Those are the Foo Fighters of
Right, right. That's like
of
Warner
museums.
Brothers or
Right.
whatever. And then there's like, Sub Pop or whatever, like maybe
Okay.
like mid-tier type museums. Then there's some smaller museums that just don't have as much funding.
Right.
But what I have found is that anytime I get offered to be in an exhibition at a museum, I always say yes because it's always a great opportunity. And my experience has run the spectrum to like bigger museums to smaller museums, but the bigger museums tend to pay for everything.
Hmm.
They'll usually have you fly you out and pay for travel expenses. Then
Right.
obviously the ones that don't have as much funding are unable to do that, but they usually will pay for shipping both ways of your artwork and insure it. So like the Santa Barbara Museum is it's a good museum, but it's not like some upper echelon top chip museum, but they're paying for the work. They paid for the work to come get picked up and they'll pay to have it shipped back.
Right.
But they're not gonna like fly me down because it's a group show.
Right.
So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
I'll probably drive down, but I live in California, so
Yeah. If I might see what my energy levels is like and see if I could drive up there.
it'll be a good show. It'll be a really good show.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's like I said, it kinda runs the gamut and, like but more to your question, like, the bigger museums tend to have collections, so sometimes they can buy your work, but then the smaller ones not every museum collects work because they don't have the financial backing for it and or the space to store the work.
Right. I assume either way that it sort of creates better exposure, which in turn provides additional opportunity to sell work.
Yeah, I kinda look at it as kind of like the snowball effect, like, it just keeps rolling down the hill and picks up more as you go. That's been my personal experience. Like this leads to that, that hopefully will lead to this,
Of
that leads to
course.
that.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. And so one way I look at it is I always try to give 100%, be as professional as possible. Don't burn any bridges.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
Like I don't
good
want
idea.
to, that's kind of how I navigate this world as best that I can. Obviously I make mistakes. I'm only human, but I try to keep that at the forefront of when I'm doing correspondence, try to
Sure.
be punctual, try to be, polite and
Try to be a good human and try to be
right.
professional.
And one thing for me, I try to be easy to work with. Like I want people to at the end be like, "Oh, well, working with this artist Ben Venom, he was really easy to work with," and that's very helpful because we've all been on both sides of things, right? And even though if this particular artist does great work, if they're a nightmare to work with, then you don't really want to work with them anymore. It's
Yeah.
just not worth the trouble, right?
It can go both ways too.
Right. I don't want to be that guy.
Somebody who's commissioning work from you can also be a dick, and that's no fun either.
And that's happened a little bit, and yeah, it's just part of dealing.
I've commissioned a few pieces with artists. I've commissioned some painting. I commissioned a piece of stained glass, and I commissioned an art tile bathroom
Oh,
from
wow.
my friend. I'll send you pictures because I think
Oh,
you'll dig
cool.
it. And that was for my friend Perry, who used to own a place out in Wonder Valley, east of Joshua Tree, called the Tile House, which is basically no need to take psychedelics because you're already there. But in every case, in my case, I tend to like to say, have fun. And they're like, that's it. I can do whatever I want. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, because my experience is if you let the artist just be the artist they are, they're going to, and you give them as much freedom as humanly possible, they're going to give you probably something that much better because they get more excited doing the work.
Yeah, totally, and I've had commissions that are like that, and then I've had commissions that are very specific, then I've kind of had, like, the middle of the road will and I'll ask, I'm like, "Give me some if you're interested if you want to, give me some general ideas about what you want, and then I can make it accordingly." But what I always say is, "Go look at my website, go look me up, do
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
take 2 minutes or 3 minutes of your time, do a little bit of research on me so you know what you're gonna get."
Sure.
Right?
I mean, I
And
presume they're already there if they're talking to you.
for the most part, yes, but it's always good to like, "Hey, maybe this is what I'm working on right now. This is
Uh-huh.
kind of like I've been interested in this kind of concept. I can incorporate that into your commission if you want." But like one I'm working on right now, this is a good example to your point. They had seen a piece that I did over 10 years ago and they're like, "Hey, we want something really similar to this." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I don't typically remake pieces. What I'll do
Uh-huh.
is I'll do a newer version of that piece." So
Right.
what I ended up doing is I went in, it's very similar, but I redrew everything. The size is different and all the fabrics I'm using are different. So the color scheme's totally different. So essentially it's a completely new piece, but it's heavily based off of the older piece that they were interested in.
Hmm. Hmm.
So is a good point that I make when I'm doing any of my work is I don't want to do the same piece time and time and time and time again, right?
Right.
I always want to push myself and do something new.
Yeah. I mean, if I could do what you did, which I can't, I would imagine that everything I would want to be its unique thing every time. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking about tattoos and I'm thinking about like tattoo artists who do original work versus pick a piece of flash off the wall.
Right.
It's like they probably don't really want to do flash.
And I always look upon it, anything that comes out of my studio should be the best reflection on me, right?
Right.
So even if it's a commission or something that goes into an auction or a benefit, whatever it may be, whatever opportunity comes my way, I still try to give it 100% because it's still my name tied to that that's
Of
out there in the
course.
world,
Of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go back to your younger days down in Atlanta.
Okay.
I'm assuming did you go to San Francisco specifically to go to art school, or were you in San Francisco already?
No, I grew up in Georgia. I grew up just north of Atlanta, Georgia. Then I lived downtown Atlanta for many years. I came out to San Francisco in 2004
Hmm.
to go to the San Francisco Art Institute.
Right,
Then
right.
I just never left.
What were you doing artistically prior to going to the San Francisco Art Institute?
Artistically, I was living in Atlanta. I got my undergrad degree at Georgia State University, which is in downtown Atlanta, and I was showing at kind of underground art galleries in and around Atlanta primarily. And then I had a couple shows like around, in the East Coast. And then I just felt that like my artistic career had kind of like plateaued at that point. And this is like probably like around 2002, 2003. And so I decided to apply to grad school. And I always wanted to live in San Francisco. So I applied to the San Francisco Art Institute. I got in and I decided to move out here.
What kind of work were you doing when you were in Atlanta?
I was doing a lot of printmaking. I was doing like mixed media cyanotypes mixed with like screen printing
Mhm.
and kind of like hand painting. So a lot of stuff on paper, nothing really on fabric yet, primarily stuff on paper. And like I said, I had some success in and around Atlanta.
Mhm.
And I'd interned at a gallery called Youngblood Gallery. That was a kind of a really cool, kind of edgy gallery back then
Yeah.
that was primarily based. They showed a lot of graffiti writers because back then, Atlanta was a great if you're a graffiti writer. It was just one of those cities that stuff didn't get buffed over like stuff does out here on the West Coast. And Atlanta, even at that time, was still growing a lot. And it was just like big city. I liken Atlanta a lot to like LA, just minus Hollywood, even though a lot of movies and TV are shot there now.
Right.
But
Yes.
back 20 years ago, that wasn't really the case.
And there was a huge hip hop scene back then too, right?
So
Wasn't
So
there?
Def Recordings had a big old billboard. The airport is south of the city, so you'd fly into Atlanta, and then you drive north to go into the city. And one of the first billboards you see before you would see the skyline of Atlanta was So Def Recordings, Outkast,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Dungeon
yeah.
Family, Chris Ludacris, all that was ATL. AT Aliens. Like a good friend of mine worked on a recording studio. Worked on a recording studio for TLC, did stuff for Outkast. This is 20 some odd years ago. And that's still all around there. Yeah, totally. Hip hop, big time.
Was a lot of your early work even then sort of informed by music and skateboard culture, or was it
Yeah,
or
100%. So I
okay.
grew up going to punk rock shows
Yeah.
like all of us in houses, basements, questionable warehouses that should be condemned, etc. Right? Stuff you probably wouldn't go into now as an adult. You might think twice, but I did all that growing up as a teenager and into my early 20s, all around Atlanta. It was a really interesting time. I describe myself as someone who grew up in and around the Atlanta punk rock scene of the 90s and
Right.
also skateboarding. Grew up skateboarding, would go downtown. Before I lived in Atlanta, we would drive downtown to skate. There weren't really a whole lot of skate parks, so we would just, like, ride around downtown Atlanta and skate, typically at night when the, people weren't at work.
Right, right. Yes, yes.
And also because it's really hot too during the day.
That's why it's called Hotlanta.
It is called Hotlanta, it's the dirty South for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. There was a couple of bands I remember back in the day that maybe precede you back when I was on tour, and there was a band from Atlanta called 86. But I'm thinking that was it's like late 80s, so
Okay, that
that
might
may
predate
be
me.
pre-punk rock for you.
Yeah, you're a little older. That I was, like, more, like, mid-90s or
Right.
probably I graduated high school in the '90s, but
Okay.
I'd go downtown Atlanta a lot starting in
Yeah.
the early '90s, and we go to, like, Somber Reptile and then Under the Couch, all these kind of little venues that
Mhm.
I think are long gone now, unfortunately, but it
Yeah.
happens.
Punk rock venues are kinda like small, art galleries. They don't
Yeah, they
usually
come
stick
and
around.
go. That's
Right.
right, totally.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're in San Francisco now. I
Mhm,
see, when I asked you the whole question about, like, able to basically do your work and more or less support yourself, and I understand you have this whole side hustle,
mhm,
but what I love about it is it seems like in terms of just your life that it's all completely woven into the fabric of your creative life. So your work life, your creative life is all kind of part of the same thing. So
right.
I assume what you're doing at this job doesn't really feel like work per se.
No, 100%, and that's what's so great about it because 'cause I'm working with other artists when they come through the program, and then I get to work on my own art. It all informs each other, and the way you described it is really good. It has all been, like, interwoven into what I do. because at the end of the day, it's still something that has come out of me, whatever I produce, right?
Right.
So it's everything that I'm interested in, what I've been exposed to, what I'm researching, et cetera, what I see visually, and maybe it be in books or online or a very interesting conversation like what we're having right now.
Hmm.
And that informs everything. And it's all kind of collected together. And a real good term that I describe my art is a collision. It is a collision of like fine art, craft, and what I would refer to as the fringes of society, kind of what we're talking about, punk rock, skateboarding, metal, the cutty, and it's all kind of collected together and then it's collided into the form of a functional piece of artwork.
I love that choice of a word to describe it. It's fantastic. If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. I'm sure over time, different things influence your work as you sort of explore new alleyways and new things to kind of integrate into your work or to collide into your work. What sorts of things, like more recently, have been influencing your creative process?
Yeah, so I saw the Ruth Asawa exhibition at SF MoMA recently. That was really interesting. I ended up making a couple pieces that were the pieces I did were like floral based patterns. Even though they're a floral based, that might sound kind of like peace and love and nice, but they're like kind of edgy. So I like this idea of kind of like violent flowers, right? Like flowers that might attack. I did a couple pieces based off of that, and that was influenced by Ruth Asawa. I'm interested in like an old like letterface typefaces,
Hmm.
and then I've been interested in like old German poker card
Oh, cool.
designs. Made a couple pieces that have been heavily influenced off of that. And then more recently, I've just really been getting into like these different fabrics and colors and stuff that I've
Uh-huh.
seen. I still use a lot of recycled fabrics, but then I started to buy some really nice silks and I'll kind of combine those with the recycled fabrics. So much like the artist Takashi Murakami and his idea of like super flat, you're kind of like melding the high and the low, and I'm kind of colliding or flattening that together. So you'll have in one of my more newer pieces, you'll have these recycled and or donated fabrics with these really nice expensive silks that are all densely stitched together, and I kind of like that duality.
I'm fascinated that you mentioned Takashi Murakami because he's actually on my list of people that I would absolutely freak out if I could get on this podcast.
Oh, he's awesome. I met him. He speaks English.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I've
sorry
seen
sorry if
videos.
that's like if I'm like outing him, but,
No,
yeah,
he's
actually,
he's he's phenomenal. He's phenomenal.
I was a part of a show that he put together up in Seattle a couple years ago, and he was there. It was something that Takashi Murakami and Juxtapose put on together. It was called, I think they called it Juxtapose Super Flat,
Uh-huh.
and he was there, and, very nice guy.
Yeah, he seems pretty accessible. Are there certain musical groups or individuals that have been influencing some of your work?
Yes, Fugazi, and I know you just had,
Okay.
Joe on recently.
Yeah.
Huge fan of Fugazi,
Yeah.
one
Me
of
too.
my top 5 bands. A couple other bands. This is, like, always such a hard question, like, what are your top 5 favorite bands?
Well,
Because
I'm
it
not asking you
changes.
that.
I know, which is funny because I used to teach. I taught art school,
Uh-huh.
and I would ask my students that as a way to kind of break the ice and
Right.
get to know the students, and then we would exchange it, so everyone would get a copy of everyone's top 10 list, right? Which I thought was really interesting.
Would you actually like exchange the actual music so people could hear it?
Uh, well, we just, like, write it down, and then it
Okay.
was up to them to go
Okay.
and look, right? But, let's see, Fugazi, Unwound, Black Sabbath, bands I still listen to.
Is there newer stuff that you've
Newer stuff?
discovered that have sort of influenced your work?
Oh, well, I've been listening to the Idols. I did
Yeah.
a piece called "Kill Them with Kindness" that was directly influenced by an Idol song. Because I used to work with Sluggo for about
Right.
almost 12 years.
Yep.
He was always bringing new music in because we would listen to CDs because he had this, like, crazy CD collection. We actually had a CD player at work, which was great. So Idols was probably the most, now that you put me on the spot, kind of blanking on things. Uh, this Japanese band, I cannot pronounce it properly. It's like Kiki Mayo, like, it's,
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
yeah, they're like
Yeah.
70s jam Japanese.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry I mispronounced the name. I apologize, but they're really good, really into them, even though I think they just broke up,
I think you're
unfortunately.
right. I think you're right.
And then there's a slew of other ones I'm blanking on right now, but I tend to listen to, when I'm making my work, I listen to music, but I also listen to a lot of podcasts.
Okay.
So I have, like, wireless headphones when I'm running my sewing machine.
Well, hopefully you've listened to a few episodes of this one too.
I
Okay.
have.
Well, that's good. So, part of what I love about your work is I can't compare it to anything. Call it heavy metal quilting or punk rock quilting or whatever. I mean, are there other people in your world that are doing textile art that's even remotely kind of in the same ballpark as the kind of stuff you do? Or is this, or are you, as far as you know, are you pretty much forging your own path?
I'm sure there's other people out there. What I do is not like a one of a kind thing. I mean, quilt making's been around for many, many, many years. And the way I kind of look upon it as, I'm just trying to put my own personal touch on this amazing history of very talented craftsmen and craftswomen and craftspeople that have been making textile work for a long time. But more to your question, no one in particular that I know that is very similar to me, but there are a few artists that I look up to, like Bisa Butler, as a quilt maker. She is based, I believe, still she's in New York City. She does really large, amazing quilts with these really colorful fabrics,
Hmm.
which is similar to what I do. Her process is a little bit different. Not to get too technical for your audience, but she uses
Go for it.
that's good. She uses a long arm, which is like a really large machine, to piece her quilts together. I use a standard kind of mid-level sewing machine to piece my quilts, and everything I do is applique, which is sewing one piece of fabric on top of another piece of fabric. That's called applique.
Uh-huh.
She does a similar process, but she uses a really large machine that kind of, you literally like steer it across, and it's called a long arm.
Hmm.
Bisa Butler, go look her up. She's amazing.
Yeah, I will.
She shows at museums and contemporary galleries all around the world,
Right.
and her star is rising. Very
As is yours.
talented. I'm trying to catch up to her. It's not even the stratosphere anymore. She's out of the solar system. Let's see, Amy Alstrom is another one. Aaron Riley does weaving, and then, Joe Cunningham is a quilter who's based here in San Francisco. He does a lot of interesting work. He's also done work with the Quilters of Gee's Bend. The Quilters of Gee's Bend is the primary influence for the work that I do today.
Right.
So go look them up, and it's Gee, Gee's Bend. That was pretty much the main ones that I kind of look towards. But I also look to a lot of other artists and musicians. But like,
Right.
Larry Pittman is one of my all-time favorite artists. He's a painter based in and around LA. Banks Violet is another interesting artist. And then people that I know personally, I look at, like Cleon Peterson, Kevin Taylor, Andrew Schultz, Richard Coleman. The list goes on.
I love that most of these are names that I'm completely unfamiliar with, which
Oh,
for me is for no, it's great. It's great. It just means that I have a lot of fun exploration to do, and hopefully, fans of this episode too will do the same. In fact, maybe I'll include a few links in the show notes just so people don't have to look too hard. But
yeah, I'll send you a list, and
okay,
then
cool. Yeah, that'd
yeah,
be
I can
great.
do that, no problem. And then also, this hat I'm wearing is done by a good friend of mine. It's supposed to be like this, like trippy, like 3D. My friend Adam Friedman, who goes by Iron Glacier.
Uh-huh.
He's a tattoo artist up in Portland, Oregon. He does these like 3D style tattoos.
Nice.
He's another artist that, if you're unfamiliar with, you should look him up.
I will for sure.
But I'll send you a list.
Awesome. I'm psyched. I'm psyched. So where are you focused in terms of your attention moving forward? And there's the things you're doing right now. What are some of the things you'd like to do or explore? Maybe things that you haven't gotten to yet or things you haven't tried yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I'm hoping to get to this year is to do some like upholstery
Hmm.
with my designs and like kind of reupholster like a nice chair or a simple couch or fabricate with another artist who does woodworking, have them build the bench, but then I'll upholster it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to do a little bit of that. Hopefully, looking toward forward to having a solo exhibition at a gallery here in San Francisco, probably early next year, so early 2027. But those things can take about a year to prepare for. Try to get back into a little bit of leather working, and those are kind of the three main ones that I'm focusing on right now. And then also making a couple more custom jackets. So the jackets that I do, I tend to collaborate with a good friend of mine who goes by the name Tool, Tul, and he is a chain stitcher in Los Angeles. And him and I collaborate on making the jackets. And like I said, they're fully custom. They're made from a pattern like how you'd make a suit or a dress. So I'd like to do a couple more of those because we've sold a couple of them and they're all one of a kind. They're all one offs.
Do you start with a jacket that pre-exists or you literally create the entire jacket?
It's totally created from scratch. I have patterns that I cut out.
So it's specific to the actual person? Like, do you have to take measurements and all that, or?
So we've done a couple commissions. Like I did one for Bron Daler. I've done two for Bron Daler of Macedon, drummer of Macedon, and then a few others. But it's based off of the pattern that we typically base things off of is a men's Letterman size large jacket pattern,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then it gets modified. That's just like the simple shapes, and then I'll go in and I'll do the design, like whatever the back of the jacket will be. I'll do all that. Then I'll send all the different pieces down to LA. Tool will like sew it together, add the cuffs, the buttons, the lining. He'll do some chain stitching design on it, and then it's good to go. But yeah, we have taken measurements, like for a couple of people that are a little bit more tall and skinny, so we can like modify it a little bit. But
Right.
those don't take as long as the bigger quilts, but they can still take a couple weeks to make because they're pretty detailed.
Yeah. I think I've seen one or two of them.
Yeah, I've done a couple. Luckily, I just sold one that we did that was a Black Sabbath Aston Villa jersey. It was Geezer Butler of Black Sabbath is a big Aston Villa fan. And so it was Black Sabbath shirts with Aston Villa jersey combined. And I just sold that recently. So it was a pretty cool jacket. I liked how it came out.
Very cool. Very cool. I love it. So let me ask you a final question. Considering that you have, pretty much devoted your life to being creative, broadly speaking, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts around what it means to be creative in terms of what you're putting out into the world, but also the things that you can do positively in putting creative work out into the world.
Yeah, the way I always have kind of lived my life is similar to what a former teacher of mine told me, Craig Doganowski, and he was like, "There is really no separation between art and life. For me, it is one and the same." And so
Right.
everything I do, I kind of look upon my life personally at through like an artistic lens. That's just how
Hmm.
I kind of look upon the world, and that kind of helps influence things for my own artwork down the line, right? Because I'm
Right.
already starting from that kind of viewpoint where how I interact with people, what I'm interested in, where I go, what I read, what I look at, what I listen to, etc. It is always a very challenging thing to do. It's not easy, but that's okay. And it's something that I've chosen to do with my time, which is so precious in this world with our lives. And so I've just decided to devote as much time as I can to producing things because for me, it's something that I find great joy in. At the end of the day, the reason why I do all this and make art and is because I want to. I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm not trying to be famous. I'm not trying to be rich or anything. For me personally, it's just something that I enjoy doing
Right.
and I will enjoy doing. And even more so now that the art market is completely tanked in the last like year or two, and everyone's kind of trying to reassess and struggle to what they're doing. Everyone's kind of changing gears. For me, which I've had to do a little bit, but for me, it's just like, well, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing because I've I find satisfaction in doing that.
Right.
So one thing I would say to people, to your audience, and anyone in general, and this is a really good quote because I totally stole it from a former art teacher,
Yeah.
is that always follow your dumb ideas and you'll never know where that will lead. And that ultimately led to me making large quilts out of like my old band t-shirts, which kind of sounds pretty ridiculous, but I was able to kind of take that and run with it and then kind of work upon that. That's not entirely what I do today, but that's basically where I started from.
Right.
And it just so happens I have a lot of dumb ideas, which is good. And I try to follow the dumber ones, I try to follow the most. So I'll leave you with that. Follow your dumb ideas.
What makes an idea dumb? Because I'm going to suggest if you've had dumb ideas and they've ended up being successful, that maybe they weren't so dumb after all.
Well, they were dumb to start maybe, and then it just I kinda got lucky, and then it kinda came back around. I look at it as kind of a very circular thing, whereas the dumber ideas kinda come back around that circle, kind of like Dante's Inferno. Maybe if you go to the bottom, like, level of hell, you actually came back around, and it turns out you're in heaven now, right?
Right.
So I kind of look at it up as upon that, but just like, to make quilts, try to again, going back to, like, focusing on changing gears and doing from painting and drawing to just completely switching and going into textile-based work, which I knew nothing about. I didn't take any classes in quilt making. I'm entirely self-taught when it comes to that. I bought a book, Quilting Basics 101, and I bought that because I had a lot of photographs because I didn't know what it was describing when it said, like, "stitch in the ditch." I didn't know what that meant, which, could be a great, punk rock, song title,
Or
um,
or a band.
or band,
Yeah. Yeah.
but, moving forward, don't edit. Just go for it. Yeah, go all the way. I go all the way.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.